Hello and welcome in this video of the SQL review series. This statement is the one we used to create a simple table. We will now use the alter table statement to make some modifications to this table. We will use alter table as the statement and provide the table name. We will start off by adding a column to this existing table employees. We will say alter table employees add, then the new column name, in which case I'll select gender. We will then also say that this column's data type will be a single character, and we will then make it not null and in good fashion end with a semicolon. It's important to note that I am now specifying a new field or a new column in an existing table, and I'm also specifying that I will not allow null values in this new field. This will not work if I have existing rows in this column, because no existing row could meet this requirement. There are two ways around this. The first way would be to specify a default value, which would then automatically be applied to any existing rows and any new rows inserted that do not specify a value for this new column explicitly. In this case, that might not be a good choice, setting a default value for gender. So the solution would be to allow null values when the field or column is initially added, and then after data has been entered for each row in this new column, we would then change the requirement and change it to not null. Now, we cannot execute this entire query as shown because it would attempt to create a table called employees, which we already have in the current database. So what I will need to do is I will need to highlight the portion of the SQL command that I do wish to execute and then execute it in the same fashion I would anything else. And now the command has completed successfully. Just like when we created the table employees, the Object Explorer does not automatically refresh, so in order to see my change, I will need to refresh the columns node, and now my newly created column is listed. In addition to adding a field, I may wish to modify, for example, the data type of an existing field. Often we may find that the initial size we had determined for a field is insufficient, or in certain circumstances it may even be too long and allow too much information to be entered, resulting in garbage information that employees are adding in addition to what we had intended for it to add. So in this case, I will modify my table one more time using alter table employees, and then use another keyword alter, and now you see why we prefer often to put semicolons after the end of a statement, because now we have two alter keywords on the same line. They have two different meanings, but there's no semicolon after the first one, so we know that the statement alter tables continues. We will specify the name of the existing column, and I will update the data type for first name from nvarchar25 to nvarchar15. I will select that part of my query and execute that statement. It has completed successfully. As you might expect, the Object Explorer does not automatically update, so I will refresh it, and we can now verify that my new data type for the first name column is nvarchar15. If I were to execute this statement on any existing rows that have more than 15 characters added to them already, I would lose the data between the 16th and 25th character. So we have to be careful in reducing the sizes of data types. In addition to that, it's also possible for me to add constraints after creating a table. One common constraint to provide would be on the date of birth field, specifying that the date of birth cannot be in the future. So I'm going to alter the table employees again, and in this case I will add a constraint. Notice that in order to add a constraint I have to specify add constraint. In order to add a column I just had to use the add keyword. Add constraint, I have to give the constraint a name, and I'm going to continue following the SQL Server standard. This will be a check constraint, which is going to be prefixed with ck underscore. I'm then going to use the name of the field to which this constraint applies, and also specify something descriptive, saying that the date of birth, for example, must be in the past. I will now specify that this is going to be a check constraint, and what must be checked is that the date of birth is earlier than the current date, which would be done this way. So the check constraint is just a simple condition that is going to have to hold true. The condition has to evaluate to true for every field. So I will now execute this statement. The Object Explorer view will change when I refresh my constraints, and I will now see a check constraint date of birth past. There are of course many more types of alter table statements. However, these will give you a good idea of the types of changes that are commonly made to database tables once the database has already been deployed and is already in production. Remember always that when you are modifying an existing table, any changes that you make will apply to the data that is already in the table. So if you are adding a new field, you cannot specify a not null constraint if there are already rows in the table. If you reduce the length of a field, then you might lose data, and if you add constraints, you might have to specify that the constraint would only apply to new fields, that the constraint is not checked when the constraint is first created, or in other words, that the constraint is not checked on existing data. We did not cover that in this video. That's a more advanced SQL statement. Thank you for watching.